Here we are, everyone, the end of another year, the last podcast of 2023. I wanted to do a special kind of wrap up of 2023 and talk about the things that have really moved the needle for me personally. And I know I have struggled with metabolic disease and insulin resistance in the past. So if that's you, chances are the things that I have done will help you as well. And I know if I hadn't made the changes that I have made in the last 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years, I likely would be sitting with prediabetes right now, even though I was doing all of the right things or what I thought were the right things. So here we are, December 26th. Hopefully your holiday was peaceful and you had a wonderful Christmas. Maybe some of you are still celebrating. I know the celebrations to go into January now. So I am hoping that you had a wonderful holiday and are ready to get back on track if you happen to fall off track, and that this episode will help you to do so. Just a couple of things. I am doing 2 live webinars this week. If you're listening to this as it's coming out, one will be December 27th and one will be December 28th. And one last one on January 2nd. The title of the webinar being Why You Should Eat Dinner for Breakfast. So I'm really going to dive into that first meal coming off the fast, whenever that is, what it should be, how to regulate your blood sugar for the whole day, starting with that first meal. We'll talk about insulin resistance. We'll talk about, proper nutrition for that and the best strategies to start to reverse that. And then my Low Insulin Academy is opening for enrollment on January 2nd. It'll be open for enrollment from January 2nd to January 12th. And then our kickoff meeting will be on January 15th as a group virtually. So the whole course is virtual. So I work with people all over the world. So you don't have to live local to me to get in to Low Insulin Academy. If you have insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, PCOS, highly, highly, highly encourage you to get in and get this reversed so that you can live a life free of chronic disease, because insulin resistance is at almost all the root cause of so much chronic illness. So get in on that. This will be my last live version of Low Insulin Academy, possibly indefinitely. I don't want to say I'm never going to run another one. I'm not sure at this point, but it will be for a while. I just have some really big projects in the pipeline, and the course will be available, definitely. The on-demand videos will be available, and you will be able to meet with me for group coaching starting in mid to late January. But the live version that I go through with you every single week for 8 weeks is going to be going away. Again, not sure if it'll be indefinitely. Trying some new things as I work on these big projects. I still want to be able to work with you one-on-one, but you have to be inside the courses in order to do that, because I don't know your history. I mean, there's so many factors that go into play. I can't just give random medical advice and recommendations to people unless I know more about you. So with that, let's talk about the 5 things that really moved the needle for me in 2023 and heading into 2024. I am almost 48. I'll be 48 in a couple of weeks. So I am definitely in the perimenopause years. I mentioned quite honestly and openly, I still get my menstrual cycle every month. I haven't seen a big dip in my hormones as of yet, but I know that the time is coming soon. So some of these things can be age related, and we've talked about these things on the podcast as well. But I know a lot of my listeners and followers are around my same age and kind of in that same lifespan. And even if you're a younger listener, it's just good to know all of this information. I wish I would have known this in my teens, 20s, 30s. I have some really amazing guests coming up that talk about the whole lifespan with female hormonal health. And I know I have male listeners too, but it's important for everyone to know their bodies and how all of these hormones kind of operate. So keep that in mind as I am talking about things that really work for me. And of course, I've already reversed my insulin resistance, as mentioned. And so my goals are likely a little bit different than yours, but I still think that what I'm going to be talking about today will be helpful for everybody. And if you get to the place, or I should say, when you get to the place of feeling like you want to, your health is where you want it to be, and you're ready to do more of a maintenance plan, a lot of these strategies will work very well for you too. So let's jump in. And those of you listening or watching on YouTube, my lighting is wonky today. It is so dark and dreary here. I'm recording this just prior to Christmas, and it is just like a drizzly, dark, gross day outside. So my lighting is not as great as it usually is. But anyway, let's talk about the first thing. So this year, I basically gave up alcohol. I had a couple of drinks at the beginning of the year. I did dry January, and I mainly did that so I would have an excuse to tell people I'm not drinking anymore because I just didn't want to anymore. But that was my catalyst. And then that went into February, and I went, 2 months without a drink. I didn't care. Like, I didn't miss it at all. I didn't crave it. When I went out to eat, I just got my drink when I go out to restaurants is typically a seltzer water with a lime or a lemon and an orange. If they have all three, I say put an orange, a lemon, and a lime in with my seltzer water, and I do just great with that. It looks kind of fancy and it's still fun to drink. So then in March, I went on a mother-son vacation, senior vacation. My son graduated in May, and I'm just really close with a lot of the moms of the boys that he graduated with. So we went to Florida, and I had 5 drinks the entire week that we were together. So it's not like I got lit up or anything, but it just kind of solidified for me. I don't need to drink to have fun. I don't need to drink, to fit in. I don't care. It's just at this stage in my life, I could see it. Even like I just had a couple of drinks like in the afternoon, and I could see it show up on my Aura ring that, I wasn't sleeping as well. And I just felt kind of groggy and not 100%. So anyway, that was the first thing that I did. And then since then, so I haven't had a drink since March. So it's been 9 months. And again, I don't miss it. I think that influence has rubbed off on other people around me in a positive way. So that is good. I did again. It's not like I'm judgmental and say like nobody can ever have an alcoholic drink again. But if you're getting to that point where, kind of like me, where you really value your sleep and how you're feeling and your energy levels, maybe take a look at, is this something that I can exclude? And metabolically, I've talked a lot about this before. Metabolically, if you have alcohol in your system, your body's going to work to burn that off and get it out of the body first, prioritizes it before anything else. So if you have alcohol in your system, you shut off carb metabolism, you shut off fat metabolism, you shut off energy metabolism other than the alcohol because it's a poison and your body wants to get rid of it. So it's very metabolically, if you're working to reverse metabolic illness, excluding alcohol can be very helpful because you're not turning off the carb and fat metabolism. And a lot of women are like, oh, I just have 1 glass of wine every night. Well, that can make a huge difference in not only your sleep quality, but not burning as much fat overnight, not going through the glycogen stores as readily as if you would if you hadn't had that alcoholic drink. So just, think about it. Think about if it's something that you could give up even, heading into January, doing dry January, and just see how you feel. And believe me, it's not easy. where I live. So if you follow me on Instagram, I posted a few weeks ago about the drunkest cities in the United States. And again, I don't place a ton of stock in these they gather how they gather the data, but it definitely Wisconsin is one of the leaders as far as so many bars. I mean, there's just little bars in every little city, and the drinking culture, the beer culture is just very apparent in Wisconsin. So I think 8 of the top 15 cities that were listed as the drunkest cities were in Wisconsin. I live right in between the number one and number three cities that were posted. So I get it. I mean, it's definitely a part of the culture here. And when I do go out with friends, it's not like I am surrounded with people with non-drinkers. I'm usually the only one. I volunteer to drive. I don't care. I don't stay out late. I don't party anymore. Like, it's just not my thing. I have plenty of fun without it. So anyway, that's the first thing that I did that really helped me to sustain the health that the optimal health that I have, and feel like, better in my 40s, my late 40s, than I have in my 20s and 30s. The second thing I did was really work to maximize protein intake. And again, if you're a longtime listener or follower, this is apparent to you. Like, I really focused on, helping people to meet their protein goals and to make that a priority. And just with, more recent research that has come out, as in especially for weight loss, it's the most satiating macronutrient that we have, that we can eat. And for women, we have been poor, poor consumers, I should say, poor, our protein intake has been poor overall for many decades. We're women especially, men too, but women especially have been lacking protein because we've been told to eat a lot of carbohydrates for energy and not eat meat, not eat eggs, because of the saturated fat, which is all, crappy advice as well. But it was really time for me to really just take a hard look at my protein intake and the weight that I'm at. And because I'm at my ideal body weight, I do not want to lose any weight. That's not a goal of mine at all. And in fact, if I put on a few pounds of muscle, that would be great. I really prioritize that. And it made a big difference for me as far as satiety goes. So I had been intermittent fasting for years, but I wasn't always feeling full and nourished for many hours after I ate a meal because I wasn't as focused on getting my protein intake. And fat helps with this too, with satiety. So I really just kind of dug in and figured out what 100 grams of protein a day looks like for me. For some of you, it might be even higher. So what I would recommend is around 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. And my body weight is more like 122 is pretty close to where I typically fall. So really I should be getting, closer to 120. And sometimes I do, but I always try to hit that 100 gram per day threshold. And this can be challenging when you're an intermittent faster because you likely are only eating a couple of times a day. And, it might even be worth your while to pull back from the intermittent fasting at least a couple of weeks out of the month. Focus on eating 2 to 3 nourishing meals, getting that protein intake up to where it should be, and see how you feel. I mean, it's okay to take a break from intermittent fasting for a while, or just focus on time restricted eating and get your 3 meals in within, 10 hours or so, and see how you do. Which brings me to number 3. But number 2, hitting your protein targets can be very, very helpful to help, especially in the weight loss arena, if that's one of your goals, because it's going to help you feel full. And it's going to help you to maintain muscle mass, the lean tissue that you have. So we don't want to just focus on losing weight. We want to focus on losing extra stored body fat. Because if you lose 50 pounds, but you're still at the same body composition as you were 50 pounds heavier, that's really not doing you a whole lot of good. I mean, yes, you've lost some body fat, but if you're still, 38% fat because you've lost so much lean tissue because you're going about it in a way where you're not preserving your lean tissue. Metabolically, you might not be a whole lot better off. So we really want to focus on maintaining the lean tissue. And so that brings me to number 3. The third thing that I did in 2023 is I really started to shift my eating window, the timing of my eating window, if you want to call it that, or the time that I broke my fast. And I started to shift that a bit earlier. I still do about the same amount of intermittent fasting as far as hours go. I'm not one of these who tracks it in an app and I cannot eat until I hit at least 16 or 17 or 18 hours of fasting. That's not how I do it. And again, I've been doing this for years and I'm in a maintenance phase. But I will say I rarely, if ever, really fast any shorter than like 14 hours. That's like kind of my minimum. And usually it's more of a minimum of 16 hours. My sweet spot for fasting for me for, a maintenance protocol is between 16 and 18 hours, almost all days. Like that's kind of where I'm hanging out. But I did shift my eating time to be earlier in the day. And that was more so in the last year. So I used to wait until like noon, 1, sometimes even 2 o'clock in the afternoon before I would eat. And for me, it just wasn't working very well. I mean, it worked. I'm not going to say I was unhealthy doing that, but when I looked at my wake up time and my bedtime and shoving all of that food, more at the tail end of my day, it didn't make sense for me. I'm an early riser. I'm usually up between 5 and 6 a.m. Even on weekends, I don't sleep. Like if I sleep till 7, I'm really happy with with myself, but usually I'm not even sleeping until 7 on the weekends. And so I thought, well, why am I waiting and then eating, the bulk of my food later in the day? And then I'm usually in bed by 9 and I'm feeling like really full. And then when I would eat later in the afternoon, I was trying to get my protein intake up and that wasn't working because I wasn't hungry when I ate that late in the day. So I find that when I hit my protein target for that first meal, which I target 50 to 60 grams of protein for the first meal coming off my fast, I'm usually full for a good 5 to 6 hours. So what I've now started eating again, and this is me, this is my protocol. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying for me, it works a lot better. I'm typically eating my first meal somewhere between 10 and 11, 10 and noon, depending on what I have going on. If I have like interviews or I'm working with, clients inside my courses. Sometimes it gets pushed back a little bit, but it's pretty rare that I'm going past noon now, especially because I do early morning strength training a couple days a week. I'm usually doing my long walks with my dogs before anybody gets up. And for me, it just makes more sense to have more nourishment earlier in the day when I'm most active, when I'm up. And I've felt like that has worked better for me. And then I like to be done eating for the day by 5. Sometimes it's more like 6. And of course, if we're going out to dinner or having people over or, something factors in, of course, I'm not going to like get all bent out of shape if I have to eat at 6 or 7. But I like to eat my dinner somewhere between 4 and 5 just because I'm hungry by then. I pick up my son from school and I come home and I make our dinner and that works for our family, but it doesn't work, this again, you have to kind of just look at your family, your environment, who you live with, who you're eating with, your lifestyle, your work. I mean, I have a lot of flexibility with when I can eat too, because I work from home and I'm mainly just working around like podcast interviews and working with clients and that sort of thing, and the occasional appointment or my kids or whatever. But for the most part, I have a lot of flexibility and I know not everybody has that flexibility. So, just kind of dig deep and think, how could I make this work for me? Would adjusting my eating window to be earlier or later, depending on the person. You know, like some people do really well with a later window, but I will say insulin sensitivity tends to peak around midday. That's, you know, how sensitive your cells are to energy and even carbohydrates. So, you know, having a bigger meal midday or, you know, having more nourishment for that first meal versus the last meal can work better for a lot of people. And another reason why I started shifting my window earlier is because I did have some cortisol issues, and my cortisol, I had been stress free, you know, stressed mom of three for years, and not always in this good of health. I had, you know, other hormone issues. My insulin was high, I had insulin resistance, you know, that was not good for cortisol levels either. So my adrenals were kind of tanked. And so moving my window earlier and doing more circadian fasting, you know, being more in line with my individual circadian rhythm because it's early, that worked better for me. And it's funny because I wear an Aura ring that tracks my sleep, and, you know, I love wearing it. And again, I don't get too bent out of shape with the numbers and the feedback that it gives me, but I do like to wear it. It always, you know, it kind of gives you like a quarterly review, annual review, and I just had, you know, the quarterly review just showed up a couple days ago because, you know, we're at the end of the year. Actually, it was my annual review too. And it's, it always says like, oh, you're an early riser. Like you're in the top 25% of people who get up, you know, your circadian rhythm is, you know, only 25, less than 25% of people are getting up at the time and going, you know, your early circadian rhythm. So just it made sense for me to start to shift that a little bit. And again, I'm in a maintenance protocol. I don't do as many 24-hour fasts, 20-hour fasts as I did a couple of years ago when I was still reversing my insulin resistance. Because remember, fasting is the most potent strategy to reverse insulin resistance because you're keeping your insulins down by not taking any food or drinking anything with calories. But you want to do it properly, and you want to make sure you're nourishing correctly coming off of your fast. That's where a lot of people go wrong. You know, you hear all the time, oh, it wrecks hormones, and, you know, you shouldn't fast if you have thyroid issues. And obviously you want to get all those hormones optimized as well. But a lot of it is just not nourishing well after you come off your fast and eating the right things for your body to feel nourished and not in a stressed, you know, having a stressed response because you're not eating well and you're adding too much fasting, and that can definitely backfire. So that's the third thing I did. And then the fourth thing that I did was I've really been trying hard. Now, this does not have to do as much with like fasting and nutrition, but I've been trying to relinquish control of certain things. I am a type A perfectionist, always have been. I honestly don't even know where it stems from. I think it's because my sisters were not, and I had to be different from them. And, you know, that was just something that I picked up in childhood. But anyway, I've been trying to relinquish control of some of the things that cause me stress and cause me to, you know, spend time doing things or changing things that really aren't that important. So that has been tough for me. I mean, here I am in my late 40s, and I wouldn't say I'm a control freak. I'm just more of a perfectionist. Like I like things to look a certain way. I like things to, as far as, you know, like social media and that sort of thing. Like I needed to take a step back and say, okay, other people can do things just as well, if not better, than I can. And that will give me more time to work with, you know, people more individually. It'll give me more time to build more courses that will help people and families. I know I've been saying this for a while. Like I really want to get my family, like my course geared toward families, where the whole family can adapt these methods safely and get that out to families who are in need. It's one thing for one person to adapt, low insulin strategies, but what about kids? Like, what about if my children are obese? What about if, my spouse is not on board? Like all of those things I want to address in another course. So that's one of the projects that I mentioned earlier that I need to work on. I need to get it out there. I just, with everything that's going on in my life, I just haven't had the time to actually create the lessons. I have the outline, and that's as far as I've gotten. So relinquishing control has been something that's that's been hard for me, but necessary. And again, going back to this Aura ring, it also tracks my HRV, which is heart rate variability. And honestly, mine wasn't very good when I looked, and I know it's very personal, and I could tell you my numbers, but they're not going to mean a whole lot to you because it's very individual. But I just feel like for the lifestyle that I lead and things that I'm doing for my health, and I know about HRV, I know what helps it, what hinders it. I feel like I was kind of constant in fight or flight, and my cortisol levels showed me that. I mean, I know that I have a stress in my life that needs to, I tell everybody else, like, you need to get your stress managed, you need to get your sleep managed. And when I don't have my stress managed, then I don't sleep as well. And so all of these things compound, right? But relinquishing control and handing some things off to other people was something that I needed to do, and I'm getting better at. And there will be more of that in 2024. So that was the fourth thing I did. And then the last thing I did, which I hope that I can articulate in the way that I want to. I always kind of have trouble putting words around this, but I have come to know Jesus a lot better and following God and the Bible a lot more in 2023. This started like right on January 1st, 2023. I just made it the point to live for God and use my gifts for Him and glorify Him. And whether or not you're a Christian and read the Bible, and whether you do that or not, and maybe you're turning the podcast off at this point, but it has made a huge difference in my life. And it's helped me to do all of the other things, the four things, do those well, be a better person, have a better heart, just so many things that it's helped me to do. I've actually joined a church family in the last couple of weeks. I went through a 10-week program that they had at this church that's local here. Went through that for 10 weeks and really just dug deep into how the Bible's put together and all of these different topics. And I just loved it. I craved it. It's what I've been needing. I've always been Christian, but I've never really lived for the Lord until this last year. And I just feel like, like a lot of people won't talk about that, but it's been a huge part of how I've changed and things have evolved for me over the last year. Another thing that I did is I watched, if you haven't watched the Chosen series, it's so awesome. Like, I'm so sad that I'm done with it. I know there's another season coming out in February, but I watched that with my 15-year-old son and we just craved it. I mean, when it got over, we were like, no. But anyway, that's the fifth thing that's really moved the needle for me. And it's hard for me to talk about, and when there's thousands of people listening, but it needed to be said. And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm just, it's been a huge difference. This made a huge difference in my life and the person that I am. And just, again, like I said, like all of those other four things that I've changed are basically because of this fifth thing. So I'm now living for Him. I'm trying to serve you in the way that He wants me to serve you. And hopefully, again, I've articulated that in a way that makes sense. And even if it doesn't, that's okay. It's just, it's where I'm at personally, spiritually. And I think in my own life personally, I've always been an active person. I've taken care of myself physically. I've done well nutritionally, even though some of the guidelines that I used to follow were not optimal, especially for me. But I've tried to, do my best nutritionally. I've done my best physically. I've raised my children, but I wasn't feeding myself spiritually. And I was really missing that. So that component, that part of me has really evolved in the last year. And we'll see, like I said, I'm just letting him guide me and doing a lot of praying and studying the Bible, studying his word, and trying to let that carry me through and giving up control. That's a lot of it was because of this. So anyway, that's my wrap up for 2023. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about me personally and what I've done that really has made better positive changes in my health in all fronts. And I hope that you head into 2024. Maybe it's already 2024 with, hope, and some of these things are refreshing to you and some new things to think about and implement. And, keep following the podcast. I would love if you have time to leave a really quick rating and review. That really helps the podcast grow. And I can get you a free download of my recipe book with that. So that would be lovely. And I appreciate all of you who've listened to the podcast in 2023. We are at 300,000 downloads. So I love that. I know that people are getting the information that they need as far as metabolic health goes. And these are the things that actually work. I spent a lot of time teaching things that didn't work, and these things actually work. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you back next week.